From the Blues Hotel Collective, welcome to Blues Moments in Time, where every groove holds a memory and every moment echoes the truth of what came before. Today, we rewind the reel, trace the footsteps, and revisit the chapters that shaped the blues. Here is our host, Kelvin Huggins.
Welcome to Blues Moments in Time, the podcast dedicated to exploring the rich history and the cultural significance of blues music. Today we focus on the events of January 29. Let's start with the cultural landscape. On January 29, 1850, in the chambers of the United States Senate, Henry Clay stood up with a stack of papers that he hoped would hold a fragile nation together. The Compromise of 1850 was sold as a way to calm the storm between slave states and free states, especially over the new territories carved out of the Mexican-American War. For the people whose lives would eventually give birth to the blues, this compromise meant something very different. It was another legal knot, tying black bodies and black labour to a system that refused to see them as fully human. Even after the Civil War, the echoes of that compromise lingered on plantations reborn as sharecropping farms, in towns where the courthouse and the cotton gin stood side by side. Fast forward to January 29, 1873, in Mississippi, a state that would later become synonymous with the blues. On that day, the State House passed a civil rights bill during Reconstruction, a part of a broader push to secure equal rights for newly freed black citizens. For a brief moment, the law seemed to lean toward justice, but as we know, Reconstruction's promise was short-lived. The backlash, black codes, Jim Crow, racial terror would slam the door on many of those hopes. The blues would arrive in the wake of these broken promises. When you hear a singer talk about a mean old world, or a man down on the killing floor, you're hearing the emotional residue of compromises and civil rights bills that never fully delivered. January 29 becomes a date where we can see the legal and cultural scaffolding that the blues would later expose, critique and survive. Now let's turn our attention to the political climate. Politically, January 29 sits at a crossroads of American history. The Compromise of 1850, introduced on that date, was an attempt to keep the Union intact by balancing the interests of slaveholders and abolitionists. It delayed succession, but it also hardened the lines around slavery, especially through measures like the Fugitive Slave Act. For black people in the South and those who had escaped to the North, the message was clear. The law was not neutral. Then, in Reconstruction-era Mississippi, the same date, January 29, saw the passage of a civil rights bill in the State House. On paper, it was a step toward equality. In practice, it was part of a tug-of-war between those who believed in multiracial democracy and those determined to restore white supremacy by any means necessary. The blues is, in many ways, the soundtrack to that political struggle. It's the voice of people who watched law rise and fall, who saw rights granted and then snatched away. When a blues singer complains about a high sheriff or a judge won't hear my plea, they're not just telling a personal story, they're commenting on a political system that has failed them again and again. January 29 reminds us that behind every 12-bar progression lies a history of legislation, resistance, and the long fight over who gets to be fully human in the eyes of the state. Now, of course, no discussion of blues history would be complete without exploring the music. If you flip through most On This Day in Music calendars for January 29, you'll see plenty of rock and pop headlines, chart-topping singles, TV debuts, big tours. But for the blues, the date carries a quieter, deeper resonance. January 29, 1992 marks the passing of Willie Dixon, one of the most important behind-the-scenes figures in modern blues. As a bassist, songwriter, producer and arranger, Dixon helped shape the sound of post-war Chicago blues. At Chess Records, he wrote songs that became instant standards. Hoochie Coochie Man, Little Red Rooster, Spoonful, I Just Want to Make Love to You. These weren't just hits, they were templates. Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Coco Taylor, and others turned Dixon's words and riffs into definitive performances. British bands picked them up, electrified them further, and carried them onto rock stages around the world. By the time Willie Dixon left us on that January day, his fingerprints were all over the DNA of rock, R&B and beyond. So when we talk about musical events on January 29, we're not just talking about a date on a calendar. We're talking about the moment when one of the great architects of the blues era took his final bow, leaving behind a songbook that still teaches musicians how to groove, how to testify, and how to turn struggle into sound. January 29 has also marked the beginning of life for some incredible blues musicians. On January 29, 1981, in Fargo, North Dakota, John Gordon Langseth Jr. was born, better known to us as Jonny Lang. By his early teens, Lang was already turning heads as a guitar prodigy, bending notes with a conviction that felt far older than his years. His blend of blues, rock, and later gospel influences brought a fresh energy to a tradition that some had written off as old-fashioned. Lang's albums climbed the Billboard charts, and in 2006 his record Turnaround earned a Grammy Award, a rare feat for a young artist working from a blues foundation. His success showed that the blues wasn't just a museum piece, it could still move units, fill venues and speak to listeners raised on MTV and streaming playlists. In the long arc of blues history, Jonny Lang's birthday on January 29 is a reminder that the music keeps regenerating. The same emotional truth that powered field hollers and juke joint shuffles can still resonate through a high-gain amplifier in front of a festival crowd. The faces change, the gear changes, but that core feeling, that mix of hurt, hope, and hard-won joy remains. Sadly, January 29 has also been a day of loss. Willie Dixon's death on January 29, 1992 closed a chapter in blues history. Born in Vicksburg, Mississippi in 1915, he carried the South with him when he moved to Chicago, translating rural blues sensibilities into an urban electrified language. As a songwriter, he had an uncanny ability to distill complex emotions into simple, memorable lines, part sermon, part street talk, always rooted in lived experiences. His songs gave Muddy Waters his swagger, Howlin' Wolf his menace, and Coco Taylor her roar. They also gave rock bands a roadmap to the blues, even when those bands didn't always give proper credit. Dixon spent years fighting for his publishing rights, eventually winning cases that helped set precedents for how blues composers should be compensated. When he passed away in Burbank, California, the tributes that followed made one thing clear. Willie Dixon wasn't just another musician, he was a foundation stone. January 29, the day he left us, is a moment to pause and recognise how much of the music we love, blues, rock, soul, rests on the songs he crafted and the sound that he helped define. And that's all the time we have for today's episode of Blues Moments in Time. January 29 may look like just another square on the calendar, but when you dig into it, you find political compromises, contested civil rights, the birth of new voices, and the passing of a giant. Join us next time as we continue to explore the fascinating history of the blues.